Good afternoon and welcome to the Workforce Observer. We have with us Karen Gonzalez, Chief Strategy Officer at Curately.ai. A workforce solutions thought leader, Karen is also a growth strategist and results-driven innovator. We are very excited to have her with us today. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same here. Now, as Chief Strategy Officer at Curately and .ai, and congratulations, by the way, for that,
Thank
you
you.
are in the midst of this AI-driven revolution. How is AI impacting the recruiting world?
In so many ways. I feel like I could spend an hour just talking about all the ways that it's impacting our industry. So, when you think about AI, first of all, AI is a very broad term and there's all different types of AI. And so, I think for people that don't understand that, it would be good for you to kind of even just go out and Google to understand what the different types of AI are and then understand how it's impacting different parts of the recruiting industry. So think about screening and matching. That's an area where AI is really increasingly being used to streamline the initial stages of the recruiting process and really helping automate some of those systems can now kind of sift through resumes, match qualifications with job descriptions, and even assess a candidate fit based on various metrics. So that's one way that it's impacting our industry. I think data driven decision making, we talk a lot about that. AI is going to continue to enhance that and provide better data, more visibility to data so that we can make better decisions. Um, I certainly think enhancing the candidate experience. And I think there's a
Sure.
big question mark around, is it really going to enhance the candidate experience? Because if we're automating more, like, our candidates kind of okay with that. Bullhorn just put out a paper around, they did a lot of research around this, and they found that most candidates are okay with certain parts of the process being automated. I think if we're talking replacing recruiters, that's a whole nother issue. I don't
Sure.
think they're okay with that. But automating certain pieces that are going to help them get to a job faster, they're absolutely okay with. Um, so those are
Are,
the two ways.
are there any tools that you use which are valuable? It doesn't necessarily have to be only pertinent to recruiting, obviously, but is there anything that you use which you would recommend, and it doesn't have to be part of the ecosystem? I'm just curious because I use ChatGPT and Microsoft's Copilot,
Yep.
but it's very rudimentary still, the way I use it. So I was just curious, was there anything that you do different?
For me personally, I absolutely use Chat GPT, and it's more so. I think we all have those days where we can't find our words, or where we're like, okay, I know what I'm trying to say, but I feel like there's a better way of saying it, and I can't think of how to say it at the moment. Like, I use it for things like that, or for things that I need to learn more about. So I could go into Chat GPT and say, what are all the different AI models out there, and it would be able to spit that out for me. So I think you can use it for learning, but you can also use it, to help with productivity, to educate yourself, and it's really a time saving mechanism. There
Right.
are also things like Firefly and Otter that are kind of note
Yes.
taking. Uh, they use AI for note taking. Like, we
Yeah.
use that internally, and it's phenomenal because it really cuts down on having, did I take all the notes that I needed to? Did I miss anything? It's a great tool for us to use internally.
Yeah, I've had people recommend
Yep.
Firefly.ai. So yeah, that's great. That's great. So what are the trends that you are seeing around AI? And of course, this is as it pertains to our ecosystem.
Yeah.
How is it changing the industry? Or is it?
It absolutely is. And I mentioned a couple things already. So we talked
Yeah,
about candidate experience, we talked about matching capabilities. Think about skills-based assessments, right? And how
right.
AI is really helping assess somebody's skills. And it's not just hard skills, but that culture fit. Um, so I think things like that, we're going to see more trends when it comes to skills-based assessments and how uh, they're using AI in that process. I think, think about remote and global hiring and how AI is really facilitating remote hiring and enabling companies to tap into a global talent pool and a global talent marketplace. Um,
Right.
there's tools for virtual collaboration and remote onboarding and international compliance. And so,
Yep.
we're seeing some trends there. So those are just a few of the areas that I think are immediately impacting the recruiting industry.
Before I jump into asking about the AI creating bias in the recruiting process, are there any other challenges? Because we are going to talk about, AI creating bias and the security issues.
Yeah.
But before that, are there any other challenges you're seeing around AI that are surfacing that the ecosystem is kind of like grappling with?
So obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about bias and
Yep.
what that means. I think data quality and availability. That's sounds like we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. I think it's the balance of human touch and AI. So where does it make sense to still have that human interaction and what things can be automated? And I know from my perspective, the last company I worked for, and certainly with Curately, our philosophy is that we're not looking to replace a recruiter. We want to
Right.
enable that recruiting team or curation team. We want to help them make them more productive. So think of the technology as the enabler, not the replacement. So I think the industry as a whole is wrestling with that in terms of, oh gosh,
Right.
they hear about AI and they're like, my job is going to be gone tomorrow. And it's not that. It's like, how is this going to enable me to do my job differently and to be more productive?
But to be fair, I mean, as a recruiter, if there are, 20 recruiters, I'm just throwing out a number out there, and you can automate a lot of the stuff, and then you keep the ones that you are very good at what they do and can build a relationship. They are going to get, and there is going to be a reduction, and maybe they'll need to be reskilled to do something else. I'm not saying that they're going to be, let go of, but it is a change. I mean, you may not find the job that you have pre AI or pre, 2023 is the same today, and then what? So, I mean, there is an element of uncertainty, and I think
Yeah.
it's not just around the recruiters, right? I mean, what about operations? What about like there are stuff. Anything that you think that comes to mind when I ask you about this?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's going to be different depending on the company, but I do think it's an opportunity for us to look at the roles differently. So you may still need those same people, but the actual skills that they're using may be different. The tools that they're using may be different. They may be going from more of a manual process to more of an automated process, but then does it leave them more room to focus on more strategic initiatives or to have that human interaction with the candidates that they rarely have time to do? And so I a lot of the companies that I've talked to, I feel like they are maybe they don't have to add recruiters, but they're trying to keep the recruiters or the people in operations that they have and just reskilling them and continue to use them. But it may allow that company to not have to add a bunch more recruiters or to add to their operations team because they can do
Fair.
more with less.
Fair. It's a different way, I guess, of slicing what you have, and so it gives you options strategically, I guess is
Yeah.
what you're trying to say. Okay,
Well, and
all right.
and I think you don't want an over reliance on AI either.
No.
You don't want blind trust in the algorithms. Again, this goes back to having that human facilitation and that human interaction. Um, AI can't replace human intuition, right? And so there
Yeah,
are still things that you need people to actually do, but back to kind of what we were talking about, what they do might look very different than what they did 2 years ago.
fair, fair. Okay, the big question, bias in the recruiting process. What are you telling your clients and what are you seeing out there? How do you deal with this?
It's AI systems are really only as good as the data they're trained on, right? So, um, if the historical hiring data contains bias favoring certain genders or ethnicities or educational backgrounds, AI may reinforce and amplify these biases. So I think about machine learning, which can be really dangerous in the recruiting process because that is something that it is learning trends. It's learning, who that hiring manager might what type of person do they hire? Is it only people that graduated from a certain university? And it starts to filter out other candidates. So I think it's really important for anybody who's implementing a technology um, that is automating pieces of the recruiting process to understand how they're using AI, how they're avoiding bias. I know for Curately, we went through a third
Yeah.
party audit and we did it in New York because they have some of the most stringent, New York and California have the most stringent laws when it comes to bias.
Okay.
And we had them validate our technology. I think as a buyer or as a
Karen, that really is intriguing. What do you mean by that? Had them validate a technology? Just give me an example.
So they looked at our technology and they looked at all these different components, and what they're looking for is transparency in the recruiting process. So there's things
Okay.
that we have within our technology that ensure that there's not bias introduced into that recruiting process. And we wanted to use a third party because it's easy for me to sit here and say, "Oh no, we're not biased and our technology is not biased," but like to have it validated by a third party that that's all
Right.
they do is
Right.
really important because it gives our clients and prospects that comfort level to say, okay, we know that if we're using this technology that we're not introducing unwanted bias into the process. So,
And this is a firm which is like just does this,
yep,
validates technology, and where they're sitting. I mean, do they? Can you give the name? Do they sit in the East Coast? Are
they're
they
in
a
New York.
technology firm?
They're in
Are
New
they
York. So New
right?
York has some of the strictest bias laws, so that's why we used a firm in New York. I can't remember the name of the firm off the top of my head, but I can get
Oh,
that to you in case you want to.
yeah, yeah. It's just interesting because then you know there is a way, at least, because this is, I'm assuming, a technology provider who's validating, So, I mean, I didn't know that you could actually do that. So it's
Yeah,
interesting. I think it would be interesting for the listeners also to know, oh, there are ways to kind of balance this out. Oh,
yeah,
wow. That is cool. And your clients are happy when they hear this, obviously.
yeah. Because I think again, AI is really broad, right? It's
Right.
a big word, and a lot of things fall under AI, and there's all different types of AI, and so. Um, I think a lot of people, when they think of AI, they think of machine learning, right? And they think, okay, I can't have that in my process. And so I think there's companies that are very risk adverse and they need to understand how you're using it, what it's being used for. It has to be transparent. And I think having that third party validate that is going to be really important to, especially a lot of the more risk adverse enterprise buyers.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Security issues. How are you dealing with that? What do you say to that?
So AI relies heavily on large amounts of high quality data. So there's going to be, you've got to look at your data quality and availability. If the data is incomplete, outdated, inconsistent, then AI models can produce inaccurate results or suboptimal candidate matches, right?
Right.
And so you got it. It's only as good as the data that you have. So I think that's a really important piece to consider. Um, I think looking at data silos in many organizations, data stored in different systems, whether it's an ATS, a CRM, HRIS, and it's not integrated. So the AI systems need access to that comprehensive data set to function effectively. So overcoming those silos is really critical.
So, do you have someone look separately at your data before you feed it in also, or have you already done that? How is that process? What do companies do? Because I know you're looking at enormous amounts of data, right?
Yeah, it's understanding how do we consolidate this data internally so that the AI can give me a more comprehensive um, analysis of our data. And there's companies out there that will do that. And to some degree, the VMSs do that to a certain degree, right? Like they're taking information from different places and consolidating it and aggregating that. So I think just companies have to assess the tools that they're using. Do they have a way to consolidate that data, whether it's through integrations or another tool that's going to aggregate it for them? But that, otherwise, their data set's going to be incomplete.
Got it. Got it. Um, let's talk a little bit about Curately.ai.
Sure.
What is the platform? What does it do? Where do you think all this is going? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So the one of the best things about Curately AI, so think of it as a talent engagement and sourcing platform. So
Okay.
we're not limited to just direct sourcing. That is one of the biggest use cases for our technology. We
Okay.
also can support RPO. We can support. We're talking to staffing companies that want to use our technology internally. Because it's modular in nature, if somebody says, look, I don't need end to end, I just want to use the technology for sourcing, for example,
Okay.
then they can use our technology for that. So they can buy bits and pieces, or they can buy the technology end to end. We the technology, I think one of the best things about our technology is that it was developed by recruiters for recruiters and the candidates. So it's looking at technology from a recruiter lens to understand how do we make sure this technology is really assisting and facilitating that curation team and helping them be more productive, helping them meet their KPIs, helping it be a more efficient process, and how do we help them get to the candidates fastest. That makes a big difference, and I think the fact that we're very highly configurable and there's a large amount of self-service, if that's something that somebody wants, we make it very easy versus most SaaS technologies. If you change one thing, it changes it for anybody using the platform. With our technology, there's so much configuration that can happen that can be very configurable to that curation partner or to that company. And they don't have to wait, for a ticket or for somebody else to do it. They can either do it themselves or they can have our team help them do it.
So so who are your customers? Like basically, not just enterprises. I'm assuming people in the ecosystem, end users of staffing, both, right?
Both. So I would say, the traditional enterprise buyer, and we also can service the mid market. I would say staffing companies would be a buyer. There's RPO companies that are looking at our technology to support the RPO business. Um,
Right.
there are, and I would say from a partnership perspective, we partner with staffing companies, MSPs. System integrators are another one that are potentially looking at our technology. So a lot of different use cases and different ways that we can help companies make their CW program or even their full-time hiring process more efficient. So it definitely was built for total talent. So companies use this for their full-time hires, they can use it for their contingent hires, or they can use it for both.
Got it. So if I was a buyer, I could do like like a salad bar. I could choose this and
Yeah.
this option. I don't necessarily have to do the whole thing, like beginning to end, not soup to nuts. I can decide what I want,
Yes,
and
and we integrate with over 80 plus ATSs, so we can integrate with their existing ATS system as well.
and who's your competition?
So
Is there competition? Who is
there
your
there
competition?
are competitors. I would say there's probably three primary competitors. I think, and I've been in the direct sourcing space for now almost 5 years. So I almost didn't go back into direct sourcing because I felt like I was working for the best technology that was out there. And then I saw Curately, and I was like just blown away by the capabilities and how far along they've come. And
Okay.
so there's probably three major competitors out there that we compete
Do
with.
you
But I
want to name? Do you want to name them? You don't have to. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I would say TalentNet and WorkLlama
Okay.
are probably
Okay.
our biggest competitors.
Okay.
But I think the feedback that we've been getting from the market is that our technology is much further along than any of our competitors. And I'm not saying that to slam competitors.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know that something like this existed until I saw it. And I think because they have the ability to develop so quickly, um, they're doing some really exciting things that we'll be releasing probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks that it's just unheard of. Like I've just not seen it anywhere else. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to share that with the market.
Right. And both TalentNet and Worklama are East Coast companies, right? I know Worklama is
Yes.
a thing. Wow,
Yep.
how interesting. So
Yeah.
it's not really recruiting based companies based here in California that are your competitors.
No,
It's
and when I say that, those are tech companies, right? So there's curation partners that we also partner with that are. I'm trying to think if there's anybody that's West Coast based. I mean, we're talking to a couple staffing companies where we're looking to partner with them on the curation side. One specifically that is West Coast based in the Bay Area. So um, it just so
right,
happens I think that the companies that first kind of really built out and developed their direct sourcing curation business happen to be
right,
West
right.
Coast based.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. What do you think is the future of direct sourcing? Because even with AI, so much, I mean, I don't know. What is it? Where is it going to go?
It's a great question, and I think there, even I feel like direct sourcing has been around for probably 10 years. I think the last 5 years we've seen a lot more um, buy-in from the market, a lot more adoption, but I think there's still a lot of learning. So I think we're still a little bit early in the adoption curve, but we're starting to see a lot more execution, a lot more, okay, now I understand it, now I'm looking to implement it. We're seeing more RFPs come out. We're seeing MSPs being more supportive of the direct sourcing solution, and how are they going to support it and weave it into their solution offering, right? So I'm excited because I've been doing this for almost 5 years, and I feel like, as a tech company, we finally got it right in terms of understanding what those best practices are, what is going to make a direct source a solution successful. Where, the first couple years I did it, we were learning along the way. It's like you're building the plane as you're flying it, and even though there were other companies that had done direct sourcing before us, they had to do the same thing, and they were still learning and figuring out what those best practices are. And I feel like we're now finally at a stage where we can say, look, here's the best practices, and every time you take one of those away, it's going to impact the success of your direct sourcing program. And in some cases, we may walk away and say, look, what you want is not direct sourcing. You want a different solution. But as salespeople and as companies on this side, whether you're a tech or creation partner, you've got to be able to do that with prospects and say, I don't think we do ourselves, I think we do ourselves a disservice by selling something that really isn't direct sourcing and calling it direct sourcing, because then people will point to that and go, well, that wasn't successful. And there could be a lot of reasons why it wasn't successful. And most of the time it boils down to not implementing the right best practices. So,
Interesting. Thank you.
sure.
Okay, let's talk about how do you stay abreast? Of these technologies. Actually, before we get into how you stay abreast, I want to ask, you're selling AI to the ecosystem in a
Yeah.
way. What's your take? What's your process? How do you do this? And what do you believe in around this?
In terms of our partnerships, or
No, just your personal, as Chief Strategy Officer, what is your process, or how do you approach this, I guess? You know.
so from a strategy perspective, there's kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? So we
Okay.
absolutely sell directly to clients, to the enterprise buyer, but then we
Okay.
also have a partner strategy. So there's our curation partners. We also have payrolling partners, some that do both, right? We have our MSP partners. We have VMS partners.
Just tell me a little bit about the curation partners. What do they
Yeah.
do? Like,
So when we partner with a curation partner, they're typically the ones that are utilizing our technology. So they are utilizing the technology to source and engage with candidates, to build out that talent community for a specific client, to build out the different talent pools within that talent community, and then to engage with talent, and then submit them. And once they submit, then it's routed to the VMS if there's a VMS in place, and the VMS remains that system of record. So the curation partner is doing everything from sourcing to submitting, and into the VMS, and that's really what they're focused on.
okay, okay.
And
So you approach,
they're dedicated to a specific client. So I might be working with Raise, for example. They're a curation partner. They have teams that are dedicated to a specific client. So they
okay,
it's very it's think of direct sourcing as building an asset for that client. So
yep.
those recruiters that are dedicated are not placing candidates anywhere else other than that particular client.
And what they're building is a talent pool for the client to go through and say, okay, this talent pool, say, has 58 people, and then they said, all right, we'll choose. So they choose a candidate, and say what happens to the people they don't choose? Do they still stay in the talent pool, or are they moved to some another client, or how does that work?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of the things that differentiates direct sourcing from traditional staffing. So if I'm a traditional staffing supplier, even if the client gives me their brand and says, go out and advertise on LinkedIn or whatever. Let's say there's 5 roles. Let's say I get 50 candidates. I place the 5. Those other 45, as a recruiter, I have to try to place them somewhere because now I've got to show ROI on the investment that I've made in utilizing LinkedIn. And I want to get those candidates placed somewhere. So they could get placed at a competitor. They could sit there, like who knows what's
Okay.
going to happen to them.
Okay.
It, in a direct sourcing model, those 45 stay within that community and they continue to
Okay.
get nurtured by the curation team, and they're continuing to be matched against other roles, even things that they haven't applied for. So the AI and algorithms are working in the background. So if they join a talent community for a specific client, let's say they're looking for a Java role, they might also get matched to 5 other roles. Like it might say, hey, you're qualified for this Java role, but there's also 4 other roles that you should apply for. So it's as a candidate, I'm thinking, wow, like this is great. I have access to roles that I didn't even think of because it's not just going by job title, it's going by the actual job description and matching it to skills that that candidate has within their profile or their resume.
Got it. Got it. So what's your personal philosophy around AI? Do you have one?
I think it is it's like, I think of it like the internet, right? Like it can be really useful. It can really help people be more productive. It can give you really valuable data and insights, which I think is really important. And it can also be used for, for evil, right? Like it can be used in ways that are
Sure.
not good. And I think that looking forward, there needs to be some more governance around AI, how it's used, some more monitoring, because I think it can get out of hand really quickly. But for me personally, and there's lots of things that people don't think about, like every day when you do a Google search or you're doing something on the internet, it's using AI, it's using algorithms in the background. So a lot of
Yeah.
times there's AI involved in all different facets of your life that you don't even realize. And so I think it can be a very scary term, but I think if it's going to help people be more productive and it's going to help you accomplish more in less time, for example, it hopefully will save companies money in a lot of ways in terms of efficiencies and driving productivity. It can be a really good thing. It's just, using it in the right way and making sure that there's governance around it.
Got it. How do you stay abreast of technology developments? And firstly, it's like a lot of reading. What do you do?
It's a great question because and people have heard me say this probably a million times if you've ever done a demo with me or met with me about direct sourcing. I did not ever see myself working for a technology company because I'm usually the last one to get an iPhone. Like I'm not wowed by technology easily. So when I do see something that I think is really disruptive, I know it's good because I think it's harder to impress somebody like me that's not kind of a traditional tech nerd in a good way. So I've had to learn a lot over the last few years to understand kind of the product world, the technology world. So looking at different industry publications and blogs, even places like SIA, and they put out a lot of great information on AI. HR Technologist is another one that I've looked at to kind of gain information. Just doing searches through Chat GPT and the internet, right, to understand again what are the different types of AI, how are they used, what do I need to be aware of from a technology perspective, what are the risks involved. Any HR tech conference is really helpful. I think listening to webinars like this, where you're having discussions about AI and how it's impacting people, are really helpful. And using your social media and LinkedIn and talking to other industry experts is really helpful as well.
Great. And I guess you would recommend the industry people do the same thing, you know?
Absolutely. And I know
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard because sometimes you search for things out there and it's a lot of tech jargon and you may not understand it all. But I think if you look
Right.
at different sources, even taking some online certifications through like a LinkedIn can be super helpful. Looking at newsletters and things like that are more geared to people that are not from the product world on the tech side and are just trying to
Right.
understand how they use it in their day to day, how it's going to impact their business, how can they use it to be more efficient and effective.
Any examples of any newsletters? We could add it later if you don't have the top of your head, but it'd be good to know, I
There's
think, for people listening.
there's there's one called Recruiting Brain Food,
Okay,
an HR Dive, and TechCrunch AI. Those are a couple that come kind of to top of mind.
that's great.
Um, so
Okay.
yeah, those are ones that I would recommend. And I think you can also get Google alerts, right? If you just set up a Google alert with
Yep.
keywords like AI in recruiting or AI in staffing to get updates on anything new that's coming to the market, that's a great way to kind of get a snapshot of what's happening.
Great. Great. Thanks, Karen. Any other takeaways as you embark on this new role of yours?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, don't be afraid of AI until you understand how it's being used. Do your homework, understand, make sure you understand how it's being used in the recruiting process. Make sure the technology that you're using has um, used a third party to kind of validate whether there's bias in that process. I think that's really important. Your legal team's going to want to understand that as well. Um, and I think, look at ways that AI is going to help your team, help your company versus kind of putting your head in the sand and avoiding it because it's like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with all the things that maybe come with that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, sure.
but your teams are going to want to understand how it's going to impact their role and what does it mean and what do they need to learn. And so I think being really transparent about how your company's looking to utilize AI and what that means for them is really important.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. It was, great talking to you.
You
Really
too.
appreciate you for your time and for your insights. For those of you who want to learn more, the links will be in the description. And have a great day.
Thank you.